Hi everyone, my name is Tori and I'm a student ambassador here at the Career Center. I am here today to help Nicole with her presentation. Nicole is from Rehmann and she will be presenting about acing a interview in person or virtual. Throughout the presentation, if you guys have any questions, just feel free to leave them in the chat and I will let her know. That way you guys don't have to feel awkward about unmuting yourselves. And pretty much at any time during the presentation, you can type in a question. We will also have a few minutes at the end for questions as well, so don't worry. And that's all I have. Nicole, go ahead and take it away.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
So thank you everyone for joining today. Like Tori said, my name is Nicole Collins. I am a campus recruiter at Rehmann. So I've been with Rehmann for about a year and a half now, and I'll give a quick intro on who Rehmann is for those of you who don't know on the next slide. But excited to be here today with all of you to kind of give you some tips on acing that virtual or in-person interview. Obviously, most of those interviews right now are going to be virtual. So some of these slides are going to focus a little bit more on the virtual side, but I'll still make sure as I'm going through to kind of touch on those in-person tips as well, any tips that are unique to in-person. So to get started, and then also like Tori said, definitely feel free to, type questions at any point, and she can definitely interrupt me at any point in this presentation, and I'm happy to, answer some questions as we go. Just to get started, I know you're all here to learn about interviewing, but to give you a brief overview of who Rehmann is, we are a CPA, business consulting, and financial services firm. We have offices really all over the state of Michigan, as well as some in Florida and one in Toledo, Ohio. We have right around 900 team members, so we're definitely that like regional size firm, kind of mid-market. We have about 150 million in revenue, and we're a top 40 accounting firm in the US. So just to kind of give some background on where I work, and we are always recruiting on campus for like accounting opportunities, but within Rehmann, we have jobs within marketing, HR, finance. So if you have a different business major and you're looking for an opportunity later on, definitely consider Rehmann too. And then to start out, I want to kind of give some tips on how to prep for a virtual interview. So I know we kind of all of a sudden transitioned to this virtual world, and it's been probably a change for a lot of you doing so many of these virtual interviews or kind of just getting started with them. So the first thing I always say is to get your technology in order in advance if you can. So, make sure you're testing that out in advance. Maybe if there's a virtual interview platform such as Zoom where there's a free version that you can try with a friend, definitely consider doing that. And then make sure your sound and camera are working if you can. You can always log on to an interview a couple minutes early just to make sure everything's set. What I will say is if you do log on to an interview like a minute early, also be ready to start the interview a little bit early. That person who's interviewing you could also be on that Zoom or on that Microsoft Teams, and they might just be ready to get started as soon as you hop on. So definitely keep that in mind if you are hopping on early to prep. And then it's always an option to ask for a prep session. So I know as a recruiter, when I set up interviews with students, I'm always happy to do that. So a couple times this season, actually, I did have students reach out and say, hey, my Wi-Fi is a little bit off, or I've never used this platform before. Are you happy to meet with me just like for 5 minutes this week so we can prep in advance? And I'm always happy to do that. And worst case, a recruiter will just say no, and that's fine. But typically, I think they're going to say yes as long as they've got the time that week. And then choose your setting wisely. So in a virtual interview, it is important to choose a spot that's well lit. That piece with having the light in front of you is really important. If you've got like a window or a light behind you, sometimes it causes like a pretty big glare on something like Zoom. So definitely consider that. And then find a spot that's quiet. So maybe somewhere where you can shut the door and your roommates won't be interrupting you and distracting you while you're in the interview. And then try to place that camera at eye level as well. So that kind of helps to make it appear that you're making eye contact, even though it's a virtual world and you're not really making eye contact. It helps to make that a little bit more realistic too. And then dress for success. So whether it's in person or virtual, always wear business professional. While you might prefer to wear a blazer with like pajama pants, I'm going to be honest, I'm very guilty of doing that most days while I'm working from home. Like even if I have a Zoom meeting, I'll throw on like a nicer business professional top or even business casual or whatever it is. But I might still have sweatpants on. Definitely totally fine. And something that a lot of our associates are doing right now. I think we've definitely transitioned into a much more casual dress with being in this virtual world. But you're going to feel more confident if you just wear fully business professional. So even for that virtual interview, your interviewer is not going to see what you're wearing other than like from, the waist up, but it's still going to make you feel confident and make you feel like you're ready for that interview if you really dress up for it. And then eye contact, I kind of briefly mentioned this, but it's a little tough to do in a virtual interview. One thing I say is it feels awkward to look straight at the camera the whole time because you do want to look, at the person you're talking to as well. If that's feeling too awkward or it's just feeling like, I can't keep this eye contact, I can't stare at the camera the entire time, try to look kind of closer to the middle of your screen. That'll kind of make it appear like you're still making some eye contact, but you at least get a little bit of a view of your interviewer as well. So that's one little tip I have. Don't feel like you have to stare straight at the camera that entire time. And then focus on posture and body language. Make sure you're sitting straight up in a virtual interview, in an in-person interview, walk in with confidence, kind of keep your shoulders back. I think it definitely makes a better impression and it makes you seem a lot more confident if you come in with that body language. I feel like even sitting here, as I'm talking about this, I'm thinking like, am I sitting up straight? So it's definitely tough to do, but really focus on that because it can definitely show that you're confident in the interview and leave for a really great first impression. And then Tori, did you have any questions yet? I want to make sure that I'm answering those if there's any coming in too.
So far, we have no questions, so you're good to keep going.
Okay, awesome. Feel free to interrupt me whenever. So,
Okay.
And then first impressions, this one kind of surprised me, that others form an opinion on you in 7 seconds. So that's kind of tough because obviously you don't want someone forming an opinion that quickly when say you have like an hour-long interview. But judgments are often, oftentimes more nonverbal than verbal. So that's where that posture comes in, that focusing on your body language and really like leaning in and seeming interested in what the other person is saying can make a huge impact. And then, like I said, walk in with confidence if the interview's in person. Giving a firm handshake's huge. And always make sure you're showing that gratitude in an interview, kind of show that you're thankful to be there and really excited about the position. And that's going to make you really stand out. And that's where prepping all this tech stuff in advance and really testing it out and feeling comfortable with technology before a virtual interview is going to be huge, because then when you log on, you're already comfortable. You can really just focus on making that good impression, and that's going to set you up for success. And then building rapport with your interviewer. So I think especially in a virtual environment, and sometimes students just in general are so ready to just ask all these interview questions when they hop on an interview that they forget to just have a conversation too. So, ask your interviewer how they're doing, how was their weekend, what plans they have coming up, and really just try to build that connection as well. The interviewer just wants to get to know you, so don't stress out about it. And a lot of interviewers actually, as a tip too, at least at Rehmann, quite a few of our interviewers will like kind of just be conversational with you. They might not even ask you that many questions in an interview. So really just take their lead. Like if your interviewer is just being conversational, getting to know things you're interested in, just getting to know you and not really asking those more traditional interview questions, take their lead, follow them and be okay with that, because that's just their way of getting to know you. So really be comfortable and ready to just kind of chat with that person too. And if you can really build that connection in a virtual interview, you are going to really, really stand out. So getting into more of like the interview questions, and this applies to both virtual and in-person interviews. Most of those interviews will probably end up being behavioral interviews if you're interviewing for like an internship or entry-level full-time opportunity. So these are where the questions will start with, tell me about a time when you, or, think about an instance in which you, and maybe that's, tell me about a time when you held a leadership role, or, describe a circumstance where you were working with a group and it wasn't going well, and what did you learn from that? So those types of questions where you really have to think of a specific instance or experience that you've had. And that's probably going to be the most common types of questions that you're seeing, again, when you're interviewing for like an internship or something like that. So definitely, expect these questions and kind of be ready to talk about some of those scenarios. So to prep for a behavioral interview, choose what you're going to highlight. So it's so much easier to go into an interview if you know like maybe 3 to 6 key experiences that you think really showcase like your skills and your abilities. So maybe there's an organization on campus that you're really involved in and you have a leadership role and that takes up a lot of your time and is really important to you. Maybe you know you're going to touch on some things that you've done with that group. Maybe you had an internship, or maybe you work a customer service job where you learned about working with people. Really think about what you've done and what experiences you've had and what skills from those experiences can kind of transfer into the role that you're interviewing for. So I know, I interview a lot of accounting students, and sometimes they come in and say, I don't really have any experience in accounting or any like related experience. And I always try to like show them that, customer service experience, like waiting tables, any of those things like translates really well to working in professional services and working in accounting because you are working with people. So kind of think about it more deeply, not just, well, I worked at a fast food restaurant and now I'm interviewing for a professional internship. Like those skills can really, really transfer well. So think about that a little bit more deeply as you are considering those experiences. And then prepare your story. So don't write a full story and be rehearsed on it and be ready to just recite that, but maybe have a few bullets of, what were some of the things I really want to remember about that experience that I know I want to touch on in this interview. So kind of bulleting out in advance can really help you feel prepared. And then practice. So if you can do a mock interview, I definitely suggest that. That's probably the best way to really mimic like doing an actual interview. But if not, just practice in the mirror. So everybody has a mirror. You can kind of just look at yourself as you're answering those types of questions. You can see, what filler words am I using? What's my body language looking like? And it really gives you a good idea of, how you're going to be in that interview and definitely makes you more comfortable in advance. And then pro tip would be to vary it up. So that's why I said have 3 to 6 experiences. It's great to not pull, all of your answers from one experience. So, maybe you worked a job for like 3 years now, so it's super relevant. Obviously okay to use that example for more than one of those questions, but still try to like vary up a little bit and include experiences from other areas of your life as well, because that can kind of show that you have diverse experiences and you're really able to kind of translate skills that you've gained from one area into being relevant for this role. So definitely consider varying it, but don't feel bad. Like if you've had an internship in your major and say you're a marketing major and you've had a marketing internship, obviously more of your answers are probably going to surround that just because it is more relevant to what you're interviewing for, but still try to throw in maybe 1 or 2 other examples as well throughout the interview. And then as you're thinking of those experiences, you really want to use the STAR method throughout the interview to kind of give the interviewer the full story and like that beginning, middle, and end. So situation might just be the background, like when was this? Who were you with? Like what was the situation that you were dealing with at the time? And then task would be maybe if this is a group project that you were assigned, this could be a new responsibility that you were assigned at work and you had never done it before. So what was that task that was assigned to you? Make sure you touch on that. And then action is the action that you individually took. So if this is a group project, a lot of times I'll see students that will kind of say like, well, we did this, and as a group, we split everything up. Definitely try to make sure that action, you're using I words. So if it is a group project, that's totally fine. But what are the steps that you individually took during that situation? So what are the actions that you took to help out the group? And then that result is probably the one that students forget most often. And it's a great way to stand out, to really pull it all together. And for the result, try to be as specific as possible. If it's a project, maybe you can say what grade you got on it. Maybe you work at a retail store and you close a lot and you work on the closing shift and you found something that made it more efficient and saved your team like 15 minutes of time at close. So kind of giving that specific 15-minute response. And if you don't have a really specific result, maybe it's sharing what skills you learned like from that experience or what you learned about yourself from that experience. Just something to kind of tie it all together at the end. And then just some to-dos during interviews. Don't skip an interview. It's not uncommon for people to cancel like really last minute on an interview if they've accepted another offer. I'd suggest if you cared enough about the company and you were interested enough to set up that interview, maybe maybe like wait it out and at least try to, attend that interview, get to know the company, and then make that offer decision. Sometimes it's great to kind of give everyone, like learn more about a lot of different companies, because you never know what's going to feel like the best fit for you. And then be energetic, obviously, be interested and excited about the opportunity, and then have questions prepared in advance. What I will say about this is obviously have those questions prepared. I think it's great to come in with some questions that you want to ask that are really important to you, and we'll touch on that later in the presentation too. But also use your active listening throughout. And if the interviewer shares with you something that you didn't know about the company that really interests you, it's totally okay to ask like follow-up questions, as they're chatting as well. So that shows that you're active listening, that shows that you're really engaged. And that's something that not a lot of students do. I do a lot of interviews and I don't get too many like follow-up questions as we're chatting based on things that I'm saying. So that can definitely make you stand out and show that you are really, really interested in the position. And then be on time. That might look a little different for virtual versus in person. I know in-person interviews, you try to get there a little bit early just so you're not rushed and trying to get in there. So maybe like 15 minutes before the interview time would be great for an in-person interview. But virtual interviews, at least for me, when I do virtual interviews, I'm like logging on right at the minute that I told students to be on there. So you really just have to be on there at the time that you were told. Really no need to like get there early unless you want to hop on a minute early and kind of test out the technology. And then admitting when you don't know something. We don't expect you to know everything. And it's a whole lot easier for us and for you if you kind of share some of those things. Be honest. If we ask you a question and you just don't know the answer, that's totally fine. And we can chat through that. So just be honest about what you know and what you don't know. And then in an in-person interview, ask for that business card at the end, so that you have their contact info and you can reach out to them with any questions you might think of later on. But if it's a virtual interview, you can always just ask for the interviewer's email. I know oftentimes I'll just send like follow-up emails to candidates so they have my contact info, but it's also really easy in like Zoom or Teams to send my email over chat if I'm interviewing you, and then you have it right away. So definitely make sure to ask for that at the end of the interview. And then these are just some questions to ask, some examples. When you are thinking of questions, I suggest thinking of like what's really important to you, what are your values that you're really looking for in an organization, and then ask companies like those same questions. So if flexibility is really important to you and you want to have flexibility in the place that you're working, maybe ask like about what work-life balance is like at their organization, and make sure to ask like every company you're interviewing with those same types of questions, because that allows you to compare too. And that tip at the bottom, kind of think of who to ask which questions. So, if you're interviewing for a finance role, it might be better to ask more of like the day-to-day, what you'd be doing to like the finance hiring manager. But if you're really curious on like specific benefits and things like that, maybe the recruiter is a great person to ask because they're more tied into HR. So kind of think about that as well.
Hey, Nicole, we do have a question.
Awesome.
So someone said that they're still confused about what kind of questions you're supposed to ask, what kind of impressions to make, and what kind of questions are going to make them stand out in an interview, and what kind of questions interviewers expect to get.
Okay. Yeah. So a few things in there. But with questions, I'd say truly ask what matters to you. So don't ask what you think we want to hear. A lot of times we'll get questions like, what do you think the revenue trajectory of your firm is, or something like that. And we know you don't really care about that. Like that's probably just something you're asking to try to impress us or something like that. And really the questions are for you, right? They're not for us. So that is really a chance for you to get to know the information that you want to know about the company. And so whether that's wanting to know about flexibility, wanting to know about what kind of growth opportunities there are, wanting to know about what training looks like at the organization, asking more about like the values or the culture. So it really is what you care about and what you most want to figure out as you're making a decision on where to go, and what offer to accept. So definitely up to you. And then this next slide actually kind of covers like how to better ask questions too. So oftentimes there's questions that I get and I'm happy to answer a question like this. So what is the culture like at your company? I will get this question probably like 1 in 2 interviews I do. Like it's so common. And so I'm happy to answer it. I know it's an important thing that a lot of people are wondering. But I will say, because I've answered it so many times, I just know kind of what I'm going to say. It's not that I've like rehearsed it. I've just answered it so many times that I know like my favorite parts of the culture. I know which things I'm going to touch on when you ask me that question. So it doesn't stump me at all. And so to get me to think a little bit more, to get your interviewer to think a little bit more, make it just a little more specific. So what is your favorite thing about your company's culture? So that's like having them pick one specific thing that they really, really love about the culture. So that makes them think a little bit more than just the general, what is the culture like? And then to get that jackpot question, what is one experience you've had at this company that you feel really demonstrated the culture here? So a question like that will even get me to think. And I'm someone that interviews a lot. And so you really want to get them to think a little bit. It gives you more insight the more specific you get, because you can see if they're kind of struggling to answer that question. You can see if they're kind of trying to BS their way through it. And honestly, you can't really BS a question like that, because it is so specific. You kind of have to have that one exact experience. So hopefully that helped to answer the question of, think of what it is that matters. So if company culture matters to you, kind of think of ways to level up that question and make it just a little more specific. And then I'd say impression wise, if you're looking for like what impression to make for that question, just be, I think being engaged, being interested, being really open-minded to learning more about the position, having questions, and all of that can kind of factor into a great impression, but definitely just show your personality throughout. Because like I said, you want to stand out as you, and you want to show who you are, because you're trying to find the company that's the right fit for you. So let your personality show, and just be conversational too. Was there any other questions, or did?
There was a follow-up question about
Yep.
asking about a salary. If it is rude, the person said that they know sometimes it's actually a very important point to make, but they don't want to be rude. So how should someone ask about a salary?
Yeah. So typically, I would say with salary, and when that comes to like negotiating salary, especially like if you're looking to kind of negotiate whatever that is, I would say wait until after you're done interviewing. So say it's like after your final interview, and there's like a certain salary that you really will need them to offer in order for you to accept. That's kind of when you can reach out, or you can even wait until you get that offer. So I'd say if you're sometimes be prepared to talk about it, because oftentimes like in a final round interview, at least for jobs like after your first job after college, I know when I interviewed for this role, my manager like asked like about salary in that final interview with me. So be prepared to talk about it, and what it is you're looking for. But I would say don't bring it up unless the interviewer does in the interview, because once they give you an offer, you can always negotiate then and kind of come back with, these are the reasons that I think I might deserve a little bit more. Is there any flexibility on your end to increase that salary by X amount? So hopefully that makes sense, to kind of wait till, at least after that final round interview, if not till you get that offer. And then that's when you can kind of say, I've had XYZ experiences, and that's why I think I deserve this salary. And you can kind of chat with them and see if there is flexibility. Sometimes there's not, like at companies Rehmann size or larger, oftentimes we have kind of set ranges for roles, but it's still worth asking at that point.
Thank you, Nicole.
Yeah, of course. And then recruiting etiquette. These are just a few things to know as you go through a recruiting season. I won't take too much time on these, but never burn a bridge when you're declining an offer. And the best way to do that is to call a recruiter. So call them on time. So if you have an offer deadline a Friday, make sure you're calling by like, before 5 on Friday. So if you know in advance, like if you know Wednesday you're accepting a different offer and you won't be accepting that offer, call in advance, because that just means that another student who might be qualified too can then get that offer. So it's kind of allowing for someone else to also get that opportunity if you just let them know earlier, and they can kind of make those decisions that way. But always call, always just let them thank them for the opportunity still, and that can leave that door open for the future. And then employers' offers can be immediate, like right after the interview, or sometimes internal processes mean, they take up to 4 weeks. So just be patient as you're waiting for an offer. And then honor your commitments to those interviews. Like I said, try to go to those interviews that you do schedule, and give those companies the chance to. And then when you are invited to a final round interview, be available. But if it absolutely doesn't work for you, request that reschedule, but then be available for the reschedule. So on our end, at least like at Rehmann, oftentimes final round interviews, there's like 5 different associates involved. I'm looking at all their calendars to somehow fit something into all of their busy schedules. And so it's tough to find like one date sometimes, nonetheless a few. So if you've rescheduled with them, try to be available at least for that rescheduled date. So definitely focus on that. And then if there is a conflict between firms, ask like a professor or career services or someone you trust for advice on what to do. But also don't be afraid to ask for like an offer deadline extension. So if you know you need a little bit more time because you're waiting on hearing back from another company, just ask. Like Rehmann will not rescind an offer for you asking for an extension. The worst case that can happen when you ask a company that is they'll just say, no, we can't give you that extra time for XYZ reason. But then at least you asked and you tried. But I'd say most of the time, like at least when a student reaches out to me for an extension, I can usually give that to them. And then remember to send a thank you note. So this is something that seems, I think some people seem like obvious. It seems obvious to them, but a lot of students don't do this anymore. So it can really make you stand out. I know like hiring managers are always impressed when they get those nice thank you notes. So send that email within like 24 to 48 hours after your interview, and then include everyone you spoke to, like it says. Highlighting your interests is great, but I would keep it to like a couple sentences. So you've already had the interview to kind of showcase what it is that makes you qualified for the position. So don't write an essay. Like there have definitely been times where students will write a really, really, really long email listing like all of their qualifications that we've already chatted about. So keep it kind of short and sweet with the thank you notes. And just mention something that you chatted with the interviewer about, because that'll help them remember right away who you were and what your conversation was too. And then 2 quick reminders, and then we'll get to any questions. We know to limit distractions in a virtual interview, but don't stress if something happens. So if your roommate barges in, if your phone's ringing, your dog is on the screen, like don't worry about it. We're used to it with all of our coworkers working remotely right now. So just address it and move on. Don't ignore it, because it's a little weird if like your dog's in the background, like jumping up and distracting you, but you don't address it. But just address it quickly and move on. If it's me, I'll be excited. I know a lot of our interviewers would probably be excited to see your dog or cat on our screen. So definitely don't stress. And then it is just important for you to interview your interviewer as it is for them to get to know you. So like I said, ask different companies the same questions so you can really compare and decide which company is the best fit for you. And my contact info is there if any of you want it or just want to reach out about Rehmann or interview tips or anything, but happy to take any questions now as well.
Yes, so we do have a question. Ellen asked, if you get declined from a job position you interviewed for, is it weird to reapply like a year or 2 later if you're still interested? And how often does this happen?
Yeah, definitely not. So I would definitely suggest applying, a year or 2 later. I'd say that's really, really common. I see that all the time. And oftentimes, especially, if it's been a year or 2 and you've added some new things to your resume, or we've seen that you've done some new things like since we first interviewed you, we're really happy to interview students again. So never feel like just because you were rejected once for a certain opportunity that you can't apply at that same company again. We've had tons of students who get rejected the first time they recruit with us and they don't get that offer, but then they come back a year or 2 later and they're just so much more prepared, and they end up with an offer then. So definitely don't feel like you can't do that, and feel like there's always time to grow, and most companies know that too, that you grow a lot as you're going through college and you have new experiences. So definitely apply if you're interested.
Thank you so much, Nicole. And as of right now, we don't have any other questions.
Okay, awesome. Well, if there are any last minute questions, I'll hang on for a couple more minutes here. But like I said, my email is there, and I'm happy to, even if you're not interested in Rehmann and you just want to ask for more tips or ask follow up on anything that I said today, definitely feel free to reach out or connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to do that too.
Thank you so much, Nicole, for coming today and speaking to Calvin students. And it was a great presentation. So just thank you so much. Like Nicole said, if you guys have any questions, feel free to email her or put them in the chat, and I will send an email to her and then send an email with all of the answers to all of you. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you.